admissions. Did I get that right as well? Great. And also with us, as mentioned before, is our superintendent, Kelly McGuire, who will let him jump in as needed in the PS 226 section and or the enrollment section as needed. And I think we're done with everything. I will stop sharing my screen and we'll take it back to Robin. Go ahead.
Kaushik, did you want to introduce Sarah before we jumped into questions, or do you want to save that for after?
I thought we just did. No, go deal with. Let's do 126 first, and then
Okay.
And then we'll deal with middle school and high school enrollment afterwards.
So let's start with any, I guess, comments or thoughts about the new program. Questions, if possible. Principal Romero will answer them.
If you could raise your hand, that would be helpful. Well, that's how we will find people if you have comments or thoughts to share.
Yeah, we just for the committee meetings, just for those who are, I think some people were looking for a sign up sheet for commentary. We roll a little more casual on a committee meeting. Please just raise your hand if you're interested, and we'll go through the list one by one. And if no one has any comments, I'll call on some committee members to do so.
So we'll start off with Hunter Dare. Hunter, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Thank you. Principal Ramos, I was just wondering if you could tell people a little bit about how they can get transportation to your school, like what are the convenient subways, et cetera. So if people are thinking about your program, they can understand how the best ways to access it are.
Great question. The 4 or the 5 to Brooklyn Bridge. You can also take the 6, 4, and 5 to Brooklyn Bridge. The other would be the B or the Q, and that's a little bit more of a walk. I believe it's in East Broadway. And then I know that many families that come from the Tribeca area utilize the N15 as a bus, and then that leaves students and families about a block and a half away from the school. The train rides are a little bit longer walk. I typical New Yorker, so I tend to walk extremely fast. So I can normally do it between 8 and 9 minutes, but they're about the same.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Hunter. The next person is going to be Tamara R. I'm going to unmute you. You should be able to speak in a moment.
Hi. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. Thank you. Go ahead.
Principal Romero, thank you for coming. I'm really interested to hear what you have to say. I know Matt is an amazing school, and we have a lot of PS3 students that are headed over your way. One question I had while you were speaking, you mentioned that in middle school, the student body population starts to diversify more meaningfully, or more representation from all groups. I'm curious, you mentioned feeder schools being one of the main reasons for that sort of diversity. Do you believe that using feeder schools is an equitable practice in a district where access to the programs offered by Matt?
She is aware that I hit a hiccup because I sent her the
I'm
what you call it form today.
Sorry, can somebody mute? If somebody,
they call it something like fitness to work forms.
Thank you. Sorry, Tamara. Sorry, Tamara.
No problem. So I'm just curious that when I hear feeder schools, I think of practices that are less equitable. And so I would love to hear your thoughts on how you feel about using that term and what that term means to you.
Look, when I said feeder schools, is just schools that are interested, students and families that are interested in our program. We do I think we've done an incredible job over the years to build the curriculum at MAT, and we do a very nice job of sharing what we have to offer. At this point, families get an opportunity to apply to these different schools and different programs. Any middle school in District 2 is a wonderful choice. And we're lucky to have students that want to be part of our community. And so the last 2 years, we haven't had any opportunity to choose any particular student, and the process has been random. So, we've had an incredible 6th grade class and an incredible 7th grade class, and I'm looking forward to our incoming class this year.
Thank you, Tamara. Any other comment? Okay,
Craig, do you mind if I just say one quick
Sure,
thing?
go ahead.
Just for one point is, I think that just to be clear about it, is that there aren't schools that are directly direct feeders to schools by any kind of mechanism that we put into place or that enrollment puts into place. They just tend to be schools where families have historically attended. All of the schools are open to all of the students in the district. But there are some schools that have been historically popular amongst some communities. And so I just want to make sure that families are aware of that when you're in 5th grade and you're applying to middle school, that you could apply to any middle school in the district.
Thank you, Superintendent McGuire.
Could I also chime in on a related, while we're on the topic?
Principal
Romero, could you also repeat what you had shared with me? You had actually, while we're on the topic of diversification, I think you had said to me that diversification in middle school actually increased when there was a screened addition to the middle school. If I understood that correctly, would you mind repeating that as well for the public?
But I shared with you that it was something that I did take notice of this last year. But I also said that it could have easily been an anomaly based on the way that it happened, right? Like historically, that's not been the case. So we'll see what this year looks like.
But just so we're clear, when you had said that when it was screened, you saw increased diversification, and the 1 year that it was lottery, you saw less diversification. That's what you had. I know it's just 1 year. I know it could be different. I have my own theories on that, but that is what you've seen so far, correct?
That was my experience last year, yes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Kush. Okay, the next speaker is going to be Councilmember Chen Kwok. Chen, you should be able to speak.
Thank you very much. Sorry, I'm off camera today. I'm in the kitchen cooking dinner. So really quickly, I thank you, Principal Romero, for your update, and it's great news. I'm curious, you talked about the student body, the demographics. Can you share something about the, the poverty level of the students? What percentage are FRL? Are you a Title I school? Do you have students in temporary homes, shelters? And also for the special education population. Thank you.
Sure. We are about 70%. We're about 70% with students that are on the poverty. Majority of that falls within our elementary school. We have about 21% of our students fall within the students with disability. And we do have a large population of students in temporary housing. Majority of those students are doubled up. What they would consider doubled up families. So they're living with another family in an apartment or in a house.
Thank you.
Are there any other questions for Principal Romero or comments?
Janie has her hand up.
Oh, sorry. Janie.
No worries. I have a follow-on question from Chen. Of the population at your school, do you know the number of ELL students?
You know the exact number. It's 67 students today. Okay. That changes, obviously, having a kindergarten and a pre-K. So the numbers, but just because today we were working on something and I know the exact number. So it is 67. It has decreased in the last couple of years, obviously because of the pandemic and what we've been dealing with. but we do, the numbers do increase with our incoming kindergarten class.
Thank you.
Thank you, Janie. The next person is Alice Ho. I'm going to unmute you. Alice, you should be able to speak.
Hello, Principal Romero.
Hi.
Can you hear me? Hi. I just wanted to say, because I'm hearing some wonderful words like equity, I just want to commend you on your school, because I, for one, am coming from a middle school, and we've been invited to come to your school on weekends, I believe on a Saturday, to partake in, I think, ping pong workshops. So I have to commend you that when I think of all the other schools that my kid is connected to, and there are quite a few in District 2, yours is the one school that I was hearing that you have gone above and beyond administration-wise to encourage your school to be open on weekends, especially post-pandemic. And I really want to applaud you there. I've also heard good measures of what has been going on to have a safe return to schools. So I commend you there as well. And I only wish good fortune for your ability to have a G&T program in the next few years.
Well, thank you for the kind words, Alice. I appreciate that. And yes, do not call it ping pong, though. It is table tennis. Those kids get very upset at me when I say ping pong. I learned that the hard way.
Thank you for that education.
Are there any other comments or thoughts or questions for Principal Romero?
I have one if no one else goes, but I'm happy to let the public go first.
I think it's on you, Kush. Go ahead.
Principal Romero, and I don't know if I forget what you said. If you prefer to go by Carlos or Principal Romero, but I'll be deferential for now. You had mentioned that you'd seen some other schools, their G&T program, visited some and their programs. Any preliminary thoughts or things that you liked, didn't like, might want to incorporate, or is it just too early yet?
I will say it is a little bit early, but I will tell you one of the things that were consistent was the variety of extracurricular activities that students are receiving in those programs. And I am confident that I've got wonderful people ready to step in and provide those experiences for our incoming class. So I'm excited about that.
Okay.
Robin, would you like to go?
Yes, Principal Romero, I mentioned this before, but I encourage you to visit PS 33. I think it's an excellent example of a school that is extremely special to many of us and many of us on the call for all of its programs.
I will call Cindy and request that she can squeeze me into her busy schedule.
Thank you.
Anyone else? I know Principal Romero is short on time, but even if you've already asked questions, feel free to go ahead again. Someone unmute Chen. He had a follow-up question, which I wouldn't normally do, but since I don't see anyone else waiting.
Yes, I'm sorry, Principal Romero. The question I also forgot to ask was, from the demographics, how is the academic performance of your students from grades, whatever is measurable, 3 to 8? How is the school performing in terms of academics and also relative to the rest of the city and state?
Before the pandemic, we were recognized. We were one of the schools that was recognized by the state for making progress. Our students were performing at about 70% in our ELA and about 72% in our math. So we will see how we fare in this new with this new state test that we just took. But again, I'm confident in our staff and the work that they do to support the education of our students and get them to a proficient level.
Oh, that's great. I mean, starting on a good, strong basis, hopefully you'll support them. But it's great to hear that a 70% poverty level school has such excellent academics. Thank you. I'm
sorry, friends, I have to go. My daughter is getting a an award for the Junior Honor Society, and I promised that I would get there today. So I got to be principal/dad as well. So
Excellent.
it's a great opportunity. Thank you so much, and enjoy the evening.
Thank you so much. Congratulations.
Thank you, Carlos. Superintendent Kelly, since Principal Romero had to run, anything else you'd like to add that he may have left off, or any other thoughts on the implementation of the G&T expansion, specifically for third grade this year? Floor is yours.
Yeah, thanks. So, there was quite a bit of a process that took place in order to identify and select a school that would really not just be welcoming, but truly capable of being able to bring in a new program and provide the kind of community and record of academic achievement that would really support a program like this. And Carlos and the PS 126 staff are they're really an incredible group. If you don't know, he didn't mention it, but I think this is like a little bit connected to some of the other questions that people were asking in regard to middle school. But the program started many years ago, or I'm sorry, the school started many years ago as being really this hub of kids who really excelled in sports and arts, and for a long time became well known around the district as being really a shining light for kids who were strong in sports and arts. And under Carlos's leadership, that just has blossomed into academics as well. For the hundreds of kids who have been participating in the borough track and field events, which they just had a big culminating celebration last week for elementary school, and I think tomorrow is middle school. That school was really the place where a lot of that started. And I know that when we're talking about a new G&T program, we are talking about much more than just sports and arts. But what I think is important about it is that they have had the infrastructure of this community to continue to have that strength of a program to really engage families. And like I said, that's had a really dramatic effect and great impact on their academics as well. So 126 is a great choice, and Carlos is a great principal to be leading this new initiative. So what we have been engaged in is the beginnings of conversations about how it is that the central office and the Office of Teaching and Learning is going to help to support professional learning for teachers who are working with the new G&T program. That is going to kick off this summer. And so I think a lot of the specifics about what's going to happen in our classrooms, how G&T, how the school is really going to embrace the G&T work is we're going to be able to talk a lot more specifically about that in the next couple of months. But I think it's a great choice. I'm excited about 126 having this program, and appreciate everybody coming out. And I'm sure it'll be very popular for our families across the district.
Kelly, can I ask you a quick question? I know that when Chancellor Banks made the announcement about expanding gifted and talented, he really did emphasize that he wanted teachers to be specially trained in teaching gifted and talented, and he wanted to return to acceleration and not to just something that's labeled gifted and talented. I believe that he mentioned all of the new programs would be accelerated. Do you know much about that? And not just enriched, but accelerated as well. Is that the case for what's going on at MAT?
Yeah, I think that's a good point to make, Robin, is that, at the heart of how it is that New York City is working with and defining gifted and talented programs is really that of a strong component of acceleration. Especially for this new program that is rolling out in third grade.
I hope that messaging is conveyed to all schools and that they have support amongst one another.
Carlos and I have been talking about that specifically. And when he told me that about the different schools that he had set up visits to, we talked about that specifically, that he would be looking at, and trying to see how it is that those teachers were accelerating learning.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Could I make a comment and ask you a question as well, Kelly? A few things. I think one, he mentioned a lot about his sports program. I would actually add to that. This is a school that we looked at for my daughter from middle school. I would add to that their head gym PE teacher, I think he was the one that's in charge of responsible for creating the inter-school league, correct? I think it's PSAL, or is that right?
Yeah, MSAL, middle school.
MSAL.
PSAL is a high school, but yeah, MSAL. Yeah.
Sorry, got it.
No. I happen to know this, so I can.
Yeah, so I want to point that out. I also want to point out he was asked, they were asked to talk about diversity and poverty levels and all that. It is a Title I school, correct?
Yes. Yeah, and I don't have the specific numbers in terms of the numbers of kids and percentages of kids who receive free and reduced lunch in the elementary school as compared to the middle school. But there is a smaller percentage in the middle school, I believe.
Correct. I agree with that. I think he said 70% overall, though. But I would like to highlight what our fellow council member had pointed out, that it's a 70% poverty level, but a 70% also in 3 or 4 in state tests. So I think another reason why this was a school that was considered, correct?
Yeah, actually, I highlighted, I don't know if I meant where it is that I mentioned this, but I did highlight a few of the practices that they were using at 126, specifically around reading in the early grades, because they're really laying a fantastic foundation for kids. And so we've brought teachers to the school from across the district to see some of those programs in place.
Great. And then last question I'll make. The other unique thing about this school that stood out to me when I was looking at it is they have an interesting math program. I believe they do 2 periods of math every day. They have like blanking on the details. I don't know if Robin knows more, but I think they have a regular math class and like an explorations or something math class as well.
Yeah, in the middle school.
Illustrative.
Yeah. And in the middle school, they have kind of like your standard number of periods that kids take math, but eight periods a week. But then they have these additional math periods that in which kids do participate in homogeneously grouped classes. And so there are additional math classes for students who are accelerated in middle school, and then additional math classes for kids who need some additional support.
I think we have one more question.
Wish we have one more question. Are we okay with that?
Yeah, I think one more question, and then I'd like to move on by 7:15 latest.
Okay, Jane Bradbury, you should be able to speak.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, great. So is math still, when you apply, do you still have to do the entrance exam? Is that still necessary to get in?
I'm sorry, for the middle
As
school?
far as I know,
the...
it's no. For middle school admissions, that test is no longer, or wasn't this. That'll be a great question for Sarah Kleinhandler to answer, but to my knowledge, there's no more. Sarah.
Yeah, hi everybody. Thanks. If we're speaking about gifted and talented, there's no more test for gifted and talented admissions at this year.
I think
no, I was referring to the middle school. When your child is going to middle school and they apply to MAT, I believe before the pandemic, you had to do an entrance exam, a specific entrance exam to get into MAT. Is that still required?
So it's not. I don't know if we want to pivot to admissions now, Mr. Das, or how you.
Yeah, we.
I think it's a good idea.
Yeah, we can do that, but
pivot over.
Okay.
I could say one quick thing.
Thank you.
Sure.
Which is just that, just to be clear, in District 2, as in, many other districts, is that we have a couple of schools that are zoned, but the But prior to the pandemic, the majority of our schools in District 2 were screened. Different schools had different criteria that they looked at as a part of their screening mechanism. I don't believe that MAT has used an entrance exam for a number of years. But
I actually did, for current 7th graders, took the exam when they were applying to middle school, because my son took the test.
Okay.
Yeah. Robin and I actually know the answer to the question. Yeah, it hasn't been the case this year, and it wasn't the case last year, but it was the year before, which I don't want to steal Sarah's thunder, but we happen to know that having middle school age kids. So we'll answer.
Hey, could I jump in for a second?
Sure. Who is this?
This is Hunter.
Oh, yeah. Okay, go ahead, Hunter.
Yeah, so I think it's important to make it clear that when you're saying exam, it was the state test, because several years ago, they got rid of the individual school tests, and now it was really based, the 7th graders are based on state tests and grades.
No, it was actually
I'm going to disagree, yeah.
test. So when my 7th grader was applying, he was invited to take the test at MAT. So he went to MAT on a selected date and took their test that they administered themselves, and then decided whether or not they would process the application.
I would agree with that, but I'm going to use this as an opportunity to transition to Sarah. If she wants to elaborate on that more, she can. We're going to break this up into 2 different conversations. One, we're going to start with the middle school, since we are District 2 that covers through 5th grade.
Yeah.
After this, we are going to address high schools as well, for those that are interested. Some people ask why we should cover that. And the reason is fairly obvious, because we have parents who apply to high schools from this year. And while we don't directly have purview over that, we have a great relationship with CCHS.
Yeah.
And have been in many meetings exactly surrounding this, that the fact that parents are applying from these various districts and boroughs, and there should be some more say, and we've taken a more interactive role in all this.
I also want to jump in and say that Sarah and all of enrollment has been extremely helpful and transparent, and has been available to answer our questions, listening to our concerns, and they really do want to hear feedback. And we're very appreciative of that, because we know it's been a long time since it felt like that. So Sarah is here, obviously, voluntarily, along with Matt, and they're volunteering their evening to help us understand more about the process.
And one more thing I'd add before Sarah starts is we had agreed with enrollment that this would be more of a feedback session, not Q&A. That being said, if there are some questions you'd like to ask her, maybe you can post them in the chat to either me or Robin, or publicly, and we'll filter through them. And I might take some limited questions if Sarah's willing, that I think she'll be able to answer. There are many things that are unknown at this time, and if you'll allow Robin and I to kind of filter that for you, that'd be great. Jennifer and tomorrow
the chat should be turned on as well, so people can post in chat.
And with that, Sarah, I'll let you go ahead. I will say there probably will be questions surrounding lottery numbers, so if you want to address that, which we talked about, if you want to address that as part of your speech, that'd be great. Go ahead, go for it.
Hi, good evening, everyone. Thank you both so much. Matt and I appreciate being here tonight. I just want to start by saying, giving a little bit of context for what's been happening over the past couple of weeks with me and my team. We have been engaging pretty robustly with parents, schools, various constituency groups and councils on all of our admissions processes. Many of the CEC District 2 leadership have been in those meetings. We are really taking the time and care to listen to families and schools and their feedback about our admissions processes. We know there have been some hiccups and some bumps and some things that have been confusing to families, and we really want to listen to all communities, take the feedback, help us inform decisions and policies as we move forward to make these processes more transparent and easier for families. And so we are taking the opportunity to use this group here to hear from you about our middle school and high school admissions. I'm glad that Matt Brigini is here too. He is our executive director of middle school and high school admissions. I want to say here that everything is on the table. So we haven't made plans for next year's admissions processes. We are listening to communities. We don't have to do things the same way as they have been done in this past year or in recent years. We want to hear what you want to see from middle school and high school admissions. And we'd like to use this time to do that. So that's my introduction. Again, we're happy to be here. Matt, I don't know if you have anything that you'd like to add.
Nope, just to piggyback off you, Sarah, I think our sort of sole goal in our roles is to have an admissions process that works for New York City families and schools. So we are genuinely here to hear feedback. I think we know this year's process was a strange process in some ways for a number of reasons, largely because of the pandemic, and we are not looking to replicate this year's process again. With new administration that's very receptive to community feedback, and with lessons learned, I think we are very ready to kind of re-envision a number of things. So with that being said, I think
yeah.
Ready? Okay, so if you have comments or thoughts that you want to share with Ms. Kleinhandler and Mr. Brigini, please raise your hand and I will call on you. We're going to start off with Jennifer Hadlock. I'm going to unmute you now.
Hello.
Go ahead, Jennifer.
Yes. Hi. Good evening, everyone. Jennifer Hadlock. I have 2 high schoolers and I'm currently teaching 7th graders. And I guess I'm curious about what the plans are. I love all this ideas about the extracurricular activities, but what will be offering support for the students since they've been going through so much and there is definitely a lot of social emotional learning loss that's happened. How is that incorporated into all these plans? Thank you.
Okay. Do you want to comment or Sarah?
Is Superintendent McGuire still on the call?
Yeah, Superintendent McGuire, do you want to comment on that question about loss of social emotional learning and how we're going to bridge that gap?
Sure. I think that, one of the things that we've learned a lot about in regard to how it is that we can best support, best support kids when they're coming into school is that we need to go a little bit beyond some of the work that we've done historically in the orientation period of the first couple of weeks of school. Sorry. Sorry about that. Historically, when kids come into the school, we spend a little bit of time making sure that they know their way around the building, that they're getting to know their teachers. But during the pandemic, I think the need for kids to be able to really have a person with whom they connected at school was important. And so many of our schools, including PS 126, adopted a couple of different programs to help to make sure that the relationship between students and teachers was being strengthened. We know that that relationship is incredibly important if kids are going to be successful academically as well as socially and emotionally. And so I think that when families see schools in fall 2022, both middle school and I think high school as well, they're going to find that there are going to be programs there that will be more supportive of kids. And there will be structures in place and kind of a more deliberate effort at trying to make sure that they are connecting with kids. So if there is one thing that I think that our teachers and school leaders have learned is that our schools are in a better place to be able to offer that kind of support, and that there are more programs and structures and teachers who are better equipped to be able to do that.
Thank you, Superintendent McGuire. Next, we'll go to CEC Council Member Daniela Egorov. Daniela, you should be able to speak.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sarah and Matthew, for being here and from hearing feedback. I think everybody at the DOE has such a huge task now of rebuilding trust with our families, and I think that's the first step. Really, just listen to feedback. And so, as somebody who is going through the kindergarten process right now, I'll have my son will be at kindergarten next year. I want to provide some feedback on the GNT process that I do think it's problematic, and I have received so many messages about this, that we have a different process for kids who are at public pre-K and kids who are at a private pre-K. So kids who are at a public pre-K just need a letter from their teachers, and kids who are at a private pre-K need to go through an evaluation, right? And that helps families create all kinds of conspiracy theories that they are trying to prevent children who are in private pre-K to get into the GNT. And so I think that's one aspect that the less we can, create these different criteria, I think that's important. And my second, and I think honestly, my main point is, I think figuring out middle schools admissions, it's the most critical thing for our district. We have seen so many problems on middle schools. We have lost so many families, and there are so many families who are in the process, of planning, moving out of the city just because they don't want to do with the middle school admissions. And I think any process we create needs to deal with the reality that by middle school, we have vast learning gaps, right? So we have kids who are like ready to do really advanced math, advanced work, and we have kids who are behind. And so we need to create a system where all these children are going to be able to get a school that can serve them. And we know that has not happened for the past 2 years. And I particularly had many concerns about how admissions were done before. There were so many subjective criteria, and some schools somehow had the kids of all celebrities, but I really think that we need to find some kind of objective criteria to really make sure that children can go to a middle school that match their interests and their ability at where they are in middle school. Because otherwise, we're going to continue with this reality that, just today I talked to another parent who is desperate that his daughter will not be served next year. So, and this year, there are kids who are literally teaching math to themselves because the class that they are taking is so behind where they are. So thank you. That's my feedback.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. The next speaker is, and I apologize if I mispronounce, it's Paula Diaz Antonopoulos Wolf. You should be able to unmute now.
Yes, thank you. I really appreciate this platform and actually discussing the opportunity for the Gifted and Talented program to be presented in other schools. But as a consultant in the field and specialized in the field of gifted and talented, I do think that it is important to have a measure system in order for children to be able to be exposed and be provided the services. As we know, for gifted and talented is an academic challenge, and it's also a possibility for students to be academically engaged in certain areas because it actually raises the level of instruction. And unfortunately, and some parents are doing their best that they can in order to provide their students, their children, possibilities of engagement in the academic field. And they're doing and working so hard for their children to be able to master certain areas, and they have the possibilities to be engaged in other possibilities of stimulating them in different areas, leading students to want to be challenged and to be able to get ahead in the content that is being taught to them and become their own researchers. So I think that because of this, there are certain skills that have been mastered by students, by children. And I do believe that a measuring system should be put in place. I know that at this point, there is no test, as Ms. Killenhender mentioned, that there's no test for gifted and talented. I think as an educator and specialized in the field, I think that gives a measure for students, and it should be put in place again. One, because it helps teachers that are being specialized in the area to understand that the students are able to master certain components that are required in the challenge of academics. So that is just my point. And thank you.
Thank you, Paula. Our next speaker is CC Council Member Len Silverman. Len, you should be able to talk.
Good evening, Sarah and Matthew. My name is Len Silverman. I'm also here in my capacity as co-president of the District 2 President's Council, along with Matthew Chook, who I believe is on this meeting tonight. The opinions that I'm about to give are my own opinions, but I do believe that my own opinions are reflective of the vast majority of the parents in our district. Bring back district priority for high school admissions and bring back the middle school screening. We need that in our district. Because our district generally contains such high-performing students, our district has been disproportionately affected negatively by the elimination of those two things. We need district priority. It's absolutely important for the high school process. And we also need the screening. Because of those changes, we've seen parents in our district leave in significant numbers. And that's very concerning. And I hear it all the time. I've been through this process with 2 children for middle school and high school admissions. I'm not sure if my 3rd child is even going to go through this process for middle school admissions, because I don't know what the situation is anymore. There's no predictability. So please, I am telling you, hear me. I'm speaking for many, many parents that I've heard from. We need these things brought back. A lottery system is very detrimental to District 2. It does not work. It is not fair to students who have studied hard and worked hard. And I'm just expressing again, please, we need those things. Now is the time to make the change back to a system that worked in our district. Thank you.
Thank you, Lynn. Our next speaker is Natasha Kramp. Natasha, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Right here.
Okay. Hi, can you hear me?
We can.
Okay, so actually, my husband is going to speak. We're both together.
Bravo, okay. Len, as you heard my email loud and clear, and I thank you. And we agree. It appears that the students in District 2 are being penalized for being outstanding students, living in a good neighborhood, and they should be able to go to high school in their neighborhood to succeed scholastically, athletically, socially, and thrive and continue to thrive. And the reverse should be said for the outer boroughs. I don't see the logic in having our daughter bus or take a subway for up to 45 minutes or an hour when there are beautiful schools right in her district that she's worked hard on to maintain her A minus, A average, 90s per se, throughout the last 2 years going into her senior year. And I know that, Mr. Silverman, Len captured it beautifully, as I wrote him, and I've written many, many other people. I think it's a shame. I think it's a shame the reverse also. The schools should be outstanding throughout the city, not just on the Upper East Side, but don't penalize the students on the Upper East Side for wanting to succeed and having their lifestyles disrupted.
Thank you. Our next speaker is going to be Faith Bondi. Faith, you should be able to speak now.
Thank you. So my name is Faith Bondi. I have a middle schooler in 7th grade and a 3rd grader. And so I've once gone through the screened middle school process, and I'm getting ready to go through the high school process. And so my input is, I do believe that we should bring back District 2 priority, Manhattan priority for schools. And I believe we should bring it back for some of the reasons that have been spoken, and really very significantly for the predictability and the certainty that is really lacking in this system. In a system that's very different than virtually any public school system, probably in the entire country. The lack of predictability creates a level of anxiety, not only for parents, but for students, that really is something that's extremely detrimental and is probably the greatest reason that families have fled the city. You have 12-year-olds completely stressed out beyond belief to a level that you've never seen, not only because of the pandemic, but because they don't know what's going to happen to them in terms of high school admissions. And that's really a very difficult thing as a parent to watch. And it's not just kids who are extremely high achieving. And so I'm going to say something that's probably slightly different than a lot of the things that you're going to hear in terms of screens. And I think you have an incredibly, incredibly difficult job in trying to figure out the admissions process, because I also don't think that 12-year-olds should have to get a 98 average in all of their core classes in order to get into what's considered a good high school in any district in New York City. I think there should be a good high school for every achieving and every level student in our entire city, no matter where they live, whether it's District 2, District 3, District 25. So there should be a place and a good place for every student in our city, in our district, and no student should be freaking out because they get a 90 on a test, or they get an 80 on a test, or even if they get a 75 on a test, because not every student is a 98 student, and not every student is an SHSAT school student, and there should be a right school for them. And so I don't envy you in trying to figure out what the screens should be and what the process should be, but there needs to be certainty in a system. And the lottery creates so much uncertainty and ambiguity for families that it is so disconcerting that that is what's driving people out of the system. I think one of the things that you heard from Principal Romero, and you hear time and time again from all of the administration throughout District 2, is they're all the middle schools in District 2, you find a great middle school. Whether everyone on this call agrees or not, that's, I think, a very universal sentiment, at least among the administration. I don't know that that's the same sentiment that people feel about the high school process. And so people do not feel like they will always, if you don't get your first choice, your second choice, your third choice at the high school level, or even your top 10 choices, you're going to find a place where your kid will be able to thrive. And so that's the concern, is finding a place where your child can thrive.
If you can wrap up your comments, please.
Sure, I'm sorry.
Thank you. No, that's okay.
And not only be successful, but thrive socially and be safe. And so, being able to feel comfortable that you're sending your child into that kind of environment where they can be academically successful, socially successful, and just find the right fit for them is really important. And so, we ask you to take all of those things into consideration and really find places for our students in our community for them, so that they don't have to find places outside of the community. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith.
Craig, can I just say
Sure, go ahead.
So thank you, Faith. Thanks for saying that. I also, as you said, that there were a few things that popped up in the chat. I know there are a lot of things in the chat, but yes, a few things around high school offers. And Matt, you can, I'm going to pivot to you in a minute, but yes, high school offers are super late this year. They're coming out next week. We know that. We have, as Matt said earlier in his opening remarks, if you will, we don't have any intention of repeating the timeline for next year. We would love to hear your feedback on timeline for middle and high school. And so we just want to acknowledge, I see that in the chat. I get it that it is anxiety producing. We are under sort of a tricky timeline this year for a number of reasons, and we do not plan on replicating that next year. Matt, I don't know if you.
No, I think we're also frustrated by the timeline. Frankly, we would love to have told families months ago. The late offer release is really connected to the very, very late start of the process, which to Sarah's point was connected to a number of sort of much broader things, and we have no intention of replicating that next year.
Thank you, Sarah. Thank you, Matt. Our next speaker is Selima El Amin. You should be able to unmute yourself. We can't hear you, but you seem to be unmuted.
What's your sign? What's your locksmith? Right now. What's your locksmith?
Do you want us to come back to you? Okay, so we'll go next to will be Matthew Chook. You should be able to speak.
Great, thank you. Full disclosure, Len and I did not speak before this meeting or today at all, in fact, and haven't discussed this at all. But not surprisingly, Len and I are in full agreement on this. And I'm glad that you brought it up first, Len, and others have chimed in, I see on the chat, and I will not necessarily repeat exactly what you said, but just to take portions of what you said and perhaps some others. You're asking what we want. I would say very specifically, among a number of things, very specifically, we want to see District 2 priority back. It is absurd, quite frankly, and I'll touch upon again what some other speakers said, which is the predictability portion, right, of knowing where your family is going to go to school. It's absurd that you can live in a district where you are bounded by an elementary school geographically. That is your school to go to. You can continue to go on to middle school and have, as to what Faith said, at least some predictability that you will get into a middle school that is at least somewhat in your neighborhood, because there are zone schools. And Faith, that is one big difference between high schools and middle schools. There is no zoned high school where there are zoned middle schools for District 2. But it's just, again, to continue, absolutely insane that there is pretty much zero predictability that my kids who have been raised in District 2 and again gone to elementary and middle schools have pretty much no predictability whatsoever of where they can go to high school. And the fact that it is June, and I know we've talked about timelines before, you're asking about when you'd like to see timelines, by the way, I would tell you prior to perhaps private school admissions or in applications being due, because I think that that's for some, not for all, and certainly not for myself, but I know for many, they have that option. And perhaps if they knew sooner that they didn't get one of their 12 choices or got a choice that wasn't acceptable as a good match for their child, they would at least have the ability to have other options and where they can go for the following year. So District 2 priority, I think, is an absolute must. It is, again, just an insane notion that our District 2 elementary and middle schoolers specifically have no idea where they're going to go to high school. And then secondly, I think the screening process does need to be reinstated. I think it proved that our schools were some of the best schools, not just in the city, perhaps, but even in a wider geographic area, and including our specialized high schools. I think screening creates an academic, what's the word I'm looking for, a place where they can achieve all students of all different levels if you have different schools with different screening levels. and different criteria. There should be a seat for every single student in District 2, and I do think that screening has created some of the best schools and the most desired schools, and the reason why many families, including myself, have remained in District 2 specifically for some of those schools. And to know that they've been, those seats have been taken away and offered to students in outer boroughs and far off distances, I think is not appropriate. So those are just a couple of things. There are many more, which I'll be happy to email you directly about. So thank you for listening. Sorry for the long-winded talk.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. The next speaker is going to be Tamara. You should be able to speak again.
I think Selima is here.
She is. Well, okay, well, we'll start with Tamara because I already unmuted her, and then Selima, we'll try you again after her. That's okay.
Hi, I'm outside, so if you hear some background noise, I apologize.
Totally fine.
You might hear some sirens.
We hear you fine.
Okay, great. I just wanted to say that I'm a PS3 parent and the co-chair of our SLT, and we've been collecting data on the admissions process this year in terms of parent satisfaction with where their child was placed via lottery according to how they ranked the schools. I'd say we've gotten nearly 85% of the families have responded at this point with direct feedback with the schools they got into. All of them have been placed within the top 5 ranked choices. The satisfaction goes from very satisfied to incredibly satisfied. So there's that to be said, that with the lottery system, that at least the parents at PS3 are very pleased and also happy that it was a more equitable process this year. We're also definitely a no pro screening school. We tend to be. An example of that is my child, who would never have been able to get into Clinton, not because he isn't a genius, but because he is a student with disabilities who cannot test. He cannot test to save his life because of the nature of his disabilities, and he's not alone in that at all. It's not that he will get into this school and not be able to get something out of it and to give something back to it and to succeed. He will. And he wouldn't have been able to even have that opportunity to begin with. So you really have to consider, when you talk about high achievers, what are you really talking about? How are you assessing them? And when you screen them, who are you screening out? So if we're talking about test takers, that's not a good metric for creative thinking, for critical thinking even, or thinking independently and outside of the box. I think a lot of students who test well wouldn't do well at ICE, for example, when they first get there, but then they would. So a lot of it is just having access to these programs. And when you screen them, you eliminate that chance of a student who could really take off in that environment. And there's no reason to do that. We're the only district in the country that screens our middle schoolers, that put them through this rigorous screening when they're in 4th grade. So I just want to put that out there, that there is satisfaction. Our families are very excited, and no on screens. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Tamara. Okay, and then Selima, we're going to try with you again. You should be able to unmute yourself.
Okay, can you hear me?
Now we can, perfectly.
Okay,
Thank you.
sorry about that.
No, that's
yeah,
okay.
yeah. No, I agree with the previous caller about screens and testing and all that. And I think my son is in G&T program at PS 111, and so we've been through the process. But anyway, I thought this was more to talk about how our middle school experience. Just give some feedback on that. So that's my notes. I thought it went very well for us. We got our first choice, which was great. I mean, again, echoing probably the previous caller. I did feel like the process was overwhelming, added to the fact that we could not visit the schools. And the school that we did visit, my son got a huge impression on that school. He can imagine himself there. So I understand we were in the middle of a pandemic, but that would have been, I hope moving forward, that's going to be an option for parents and children. I think also some sort of, there was this great website that was a bit of a clearinghouse for a lot of information, but maybe the schools could have fed in the dates of when they were having tours, or uploading videos of their school, whatever it is, just to help us really understand and imagine ourselves at the school, because that was the hardest part. I guess just some general guidance. We did look at all the videos that were posted by the DOE, which is great, how to choose a school, but it was very hard to determine what would be a good fit for my son. So, what we were supposed to look for. And our guidance counselor was helpful, but she just initially just gave us a list of schools, and she gave us some pointers, but it was just really difficult to just figure out what we should be looking for. So anyway, thank you very much for this forum. And I know it was a difficult thing to do during the pandemic and transitioning of administrations. So thank you for the effort.
Thank you, Selima. Next will be Heather Zico. Heather, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you. And I want to thank you for the forum as well. I really appreciate it. I know that you're in a difficult position. I want to go back to what Faith said, because I really agree with her perspective in that if we go back to the beginning of education within New York City as a whole and focus on pre-K up and start kids learning adequately, I don't think that we would need to focus so much on G&T programs, screening schools, or high schools. I mean, the process right now is, right now specifically, we are changing the rules in the middle of the game, which doesn't work at all. It doesn't work for anyone. It doesn't work for the high achievers. It doesn't work for the low achievers. So most of us know, I think for everyone I know, almost everyone I know one child, I think, who was not prepped for the G&T. And I mean substantially prepped, either by their parents or by tutors. So that in itself really affects the level of diversity that I know a lot of us would like to see. The same happens with the SHSAT, but that's at a different level because of the age of the child. I think that we really need to go back to basics with the education in New York. And as Faith said, there should be schools everywhere in every district that are meeting a minimum standard. Regarding screening, I think that screening is important so that high achievers are placed with kids that are on their level, so that no one is underachieving or feeling oppressed within their peer group. But I think that markers via grades would be a great way to screen rather than testing. As Tamara indicated, a lot of kids don't test well. I mean, this is all just really obvious stuff that I know I'm sure we're all thinking. I think that it resolves a lot of issues about district priorities, screen schools, and finally, I have an 8th grader right now in a great middle school who has been through just through a really challenging process between COVID and no tours, lottery numbers all over the place. The screening criteria changed so many times this year. We didn't know if he was going to hit the mark for a point, I think 4 percentage point. It was ridiculous for the screen high schools. And now we're waiting until almost a week before school ends to find out what's happening. And
you can start to conclude your comments, please.
Yeah. So I wish that you would consider releasing the high school release the high schools this week. I'd like to put that out there. And if we start to go back to thinking about basics and not being distracted with other programs like G&T, just make the schools better for everyone. And that's it.
Thank you. And our next speaker is Johannes Homan. I apologize if I messed that up. Johannes, go ahead.
No, you got it right. Thank you very much. Listen, I guess I wanted to start by saying I was heartened when Chancellor Banks in March said that too many, in his 4 pillar speech, said that too many schools don't provide enough academic rigor and opportunities for accelerated learning. And there should be opportunities for accelerated learning in every school. I do want to talk about the middle schools, both the programming and the admissions, but I think that that's a start. I think we need to get away from the scarcity model. So for example, with G&T, I think that there should be seats for every child who qualifies. Why not open it up to 10% or more of the students? But speaking about middle school, I have my son just went through the middle school process. My older child went through under the prior screening process. I'll say 2 things. First, with regard to the programming, I'm glad that it was announced a couple of weeks ago at the CECD2 meeting that District 2 would add accelerated math programming. There's 2 sides to the coin. One is the programming. And I think at the middle school level, it needs to be raised. And I'm glad that the accelerated math programming is coming back. I hope, and I would implore you to do the same for ELA and other subject matters. I think you need to meet students where they are. The other part is with the admissions. There's a lot of uncertainty in the process, and I know a number of families, friends of my son, their families are leaving because of not only the programming and the lack of accelerated programming, but also the uncertainty around the process. So if you could start to bring back some objective criteria for the middle school admissions, expand the accelerated programming, I think you could get to win for everybody involved, and really, strengthen the program. I know it's a great challenge for you, Sarah and Matthew, but I think it's also a great opportunity to create something that's bigger and better than it was prior to all of this. I'll end my statements there. But thank you for the opportunity to give feedback.
Thank you, Johannes. Appreciate it. Our next speaker is going to be CEC Council Member Chen Kwok. Chen, you should be able to speak.
Yes, hi. Can you hear me okay?
Perfectly.
Yeah, I'm going to stay off camera. So I think I thank you for everyone's comments. I wanted to listen to everyone's comments first. I think we need to set a baseline of what we're trying to achieve with education. I think one is to support our students wherever their learning needs may be, whether it's students with IEPs, with special education, with ELLs, second language, extra help for those who are struggling with math or English, and also supporting kids who can achieve at a higher level or an accelerated level. But these supports are not found in every school. So what happens is then where they are available, students start clamoring to sign up for these schools. And rightfully, I believe every child should have a right to go to any school that meets his or her needs. But right now, what we've had for the past, I don't know how many years, unfortunately, there have been only a few districts that have such programs. And this is what happens when a lot of families want to come to District 2 or other districts with good programs available to support the children. I've spoken about this with G&T, where kids from the Bronx, from Queens and Brooklyn come to Midtown Manhattan to go to PS 111 because they're in search of a great program. Well, how about putting programs in every school that will meet every student's needs, including special education, ELL, and accelerated education, both in middle school and in high school. We shouldn't limit the spectrum of learning only for K-5 and call it G&T and end it there. It should be from K-12. I think another notion that we need to support for our children and instill in them is that, especially for struggling students who are disadvantaged, low income, they can't escape the system. And where they can, they go to charter schools and private schools if they have high academic achievement, get scholarships. But what we need to do is recognize that students need support, regardless of their background, and then provide it. And so in teaching them the mindset that if you work hard, if you make the effort, the education system, the teachers, the educators, the system will give you the opportunities, will let you, regardless of your family background, whatever support you do have or don't have. A lot of District 2 families, I don't think understand that. They have resources at home. You know, it's a District 2 is a wealthier wealthier district. So they can say, I don't need this program, and I can move to another district or another school system, but their families who don't have these resources, they rely on. So what we need to teach, what we need to help them with is, instill the notion that we will support you if you make the effort, but if you do lotteries, your effort is not recognized, then you're just subject to a roll of dice. Do we want our children to learn that any effort that they put in will be squashed because of the roll of a dice? And that is the wrong message to send to kids. This will discourage kids from putting
and
the effort.
Chen, if you can wrap up your remarks.
Yeah. So
Thank
those
you.
are my 2 points that I want to make, that we need to expand our thinking about how we put these programs in based on those ideas I put forth. Thank you.
Thank you, Chen. Appreciate it. Next, we're going to go to Fire, who I think is going to probably read some of the comments that came in anonymously. Fire.
Yes, I am here. Give me one moment. Good evening, everyone. Thank you for having me tonight. Okay, one family particularly came from Lab Middle School, and their comment and feedback, as well as a question, is Lab Middle School used to have a strong math program for gifted and talented students, selected via screening. The school won citywide math count. I know this firsthand as my son was lucky to have benefited from that program. Her or his question is, will District 2 be able to provide this kind of program that can attract the best math students? Thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Fire. Tunisia, I think there was a question that came in. Do you want to talk about, report that question? Do you want me to come back to you?
Yes, come back to me. I'm responding
That's
to
fine.
someone.
That's fine. We'll come back to you. So the next speaker is going to be Alice Ho. Alice, you should be able to speak now.
Hello, can you hear me?
We can, perfectly.
Okay, hi. So I actually happen to be on the SLT for lab, and I know of what she speaks of as the previous speaker. I'll quickly try to address that. Principal Meg has very consistently all year long indicated her goals as an SLT member to us, but I believe if we haven't done a good job, I apologize to this family. We have our minutes, we indicate them regularly that algebra for all is the standard, and illustrative math, I might be mispronouncing that, is the accelerated version that we'll be using, as well as eMath for 8th grade. This is an improvement from when my child was in attendance in 2017 at lab, and I have seen an improvement actually since 2017. So I'm not quite sure what in reference this is about besides a competition, but other than that, the standards are high or higher than before because everyone was encouraged to take regents this year, which wasn't the case before. But to address the admissions issue, I just want to be clear that pre-pandemic, and again, I believe my timing on this was 2017, absenteeism was counted as the metric for admissions. As the DOE calendar has just now been available, I believe it states September 8th, 2022 to June 27th of 2023. Please consider not reintroducing absences as a demerit for admissions. And again, I've heard it a couple of times. I'm going to reiterate because I do believe that to be the case. You do, if possible, because we all see it as transparent to us, if you could provide the admissions results earlier, I think we've been slightly accustomed to pre-pandemic to get them a bit earlier, and we're hoping to go back to a norm where there's more time for parents to make adjustments when we know that the news isn't always good for everybody. So again, if possible, if you can share that information earlier, at least a couple of weeks is what I'm hearing. So early April for middle school and mid-May for high school, as opposed to having to wait till June. Thank you. I yield my time.
Thank you, Alice. I'm going to read a comment that came in. It's related to what the previous speaker spoke. This is a comment that came in from a parent. The chancellor promised that admission decisions would be earlier next year. Does that mean pre-COVID timelines or hopefully even earlier? It has never been clear why it should take so many months past application to get results. With the CHSAT based purely on test results on middle schools, which are pure lottery, I have never understood why it takes so long to get placements, raising anxiety for families. And for some families, there are substantial lost fees who have also applied to private school purely as a backup, but prefer to go to public school. So that was a related comment. So we'll go back to the speakers. The next speaker is going to be Shoshana Green. Shoshana, you should be able to speak.
Hi, good evening, everybody. Thanks for the time to speak. I just want to take a moment and first of all, echo Faith's comments. I have thought this for a few years. I now have a 6th grader and a 9th grader, and I haven't heard anyone articulated quite like that. And while we have representation from the district enrollment processes from the DOE on the phone, I wonder if we are sort of conflating two ideas, right? So there's the idea that we have locally based zoned high schools in Manhattan where students can get to back and forth on foot. We know teenagers need to sleep more, and sort of have that community-based aspect. But then when we start to introduce the screening conversation, and I agree, just because a student maybe gets a B+ on an algebra test doesn't necessarily mean he shouldn't be able to go to his zoned high school, right? Especially when some of those screening options are confusing or unclear. And I just went through the process for middle school and high school with both of my children last year. So this idea that we're thinking that this, you know, that there's this screening process and there's this localization process kind of, you know, provides the issue. I think that something that we have to think of is how big are these schools? And so it becomes more of a math and a logistics problem, right? If you look at the number of students in a neighborhood and where the closest high school is and what those numbers look like, then we can have a conversation about providing more, you know, equity in instruction, right? The right instruction for kids to be successful with rigor as they need it and where they need it, versus saying, okay, if I go to my most local high school, if I don't have a 99 and 2 4.5s on the test, which of course now is pretty obsolete, you know, given the impact of remote learning. I just wonder if we're not conflating two ideas and it keeps putting us back at the same point of, you know, this idea that this is what kind of draws attention to the issue as well. So I'm just thinking, wow, we have district enrollment I don't know if it's more of a math problem, allocating seats to students. Clinton is in the chat a lot and they can't hold a lot of kids. They simply can't hold a lot of kids. They don't have the built-in capacity. So thanks, Faith, for your comments.
Thank you, Shoshana. The next speaker is going to be Emily Greytech. Emily, you should be able to unmute yourself.
Hi, thank you so much. Appreciate
Thanks,
the
Emily.
opportunity. And I just wanted to share that there are, I think, a lot of parents and a lot of children who actually are very happy with the lottery system. And part of that is due to the amount of stress and high pressure that is put on elementary school students to get chosen based on a screening. With the lottery, you don't have that. Yes, you may not get your first choice, but it's not saying you don't get your first choice because you're not smart enough or because you didn't try hard enough. Because I think many of us who've even spoken even in favor of getting rid of the lottery and keeping screens have noted that the test in itself is just that. A test is only one test and it doesn't measure multiple kinds of intelligences. And we all know that many people are very intelligent and high achieving despite not doing well on tests. I also just wanted to add that I think the value of having students with different learning styles, different learning capacities and skills in, you know, some may be great in math, some may be great in music, and having those mix of groups together, you're able to learn from each other. And speaking as sort of a parent of a high achieving student, I can say that the value of them being able to learn best by supporting others or explaining things in other ways to other people that can be helpful is really invaluable. And actually, like, developmentally, and educational research shows that that is incredibly valuable, and learn way better that way than being over tested or studying for tests for part of the year, just because it is such high pressure. So I would like to say that by keeping the lottery system for middle school, we are helping to support children's mental health. We're helping to support parents' decision fatigue and ability to make sort of these choices that seem to be so set up children to go in a certain trajectory before they even hit puberty. So I just want to say that I'm speaking, I know, on behalf of many other parents as well. Of course, not every parent, but many other parents as well that say we would like to keep the lottery for many different reasons and not go back to screening in middle schools. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. Excuse me, the next speaker is CEC Council Member Lupe Hernandez. Lupe, you should be able to speak.
Yes, thank you. Can you hear me?
We can hear you fine. Thank you, Lupe.
Thank you. Yes, I'm one of the CEC members, and I've gotten some emails regarding this. I know some parents that were not able to attend this evening, but they did email. And before I go into their testimony, I would like to just highlight many families have been very happy with the lottery system. I think there's been great concern even with the possibility of the attendance being equated in regards to enrollment. I am the chair of Students with Disabilities, and a lot of students throughout our district that are bused. Busing causes many issues, from students not even being picked up to get to school. Absenteeism was a problem for these students prior to the pandemic, and it only exacerbated. In fact, I think the pandemic really highlighted the segregation and egregious in the unaccessibility for many students throughout this district and the city to be able to access some of the best schools that the city has to offer. It just so happens that District 2 does have some of the most. And we've heard from middle school families that did not have to have the pressure for their students in these past 2 years. Enrollment process was really a breath of fresh air, a weight off of their shoulders. And I'd like to piggyback off of what the previous speaker said in regards to mental health and the crisis that we are seeing. Again, it exacerbated during the pandemic. And I think all students should have the opportunity to be challenged and accelerated. As previous speakers have mentioned, there are students that may not test well, even with accommodations. There may be students that accelerate in one subject area and not in another, and they should still be met where they are at. Before I leave, I did want to mention from a parent. She says, my daughter is a 5th grader at PS3 in District 2. We went through the middle school admissions process this year, and I would strongly advocate for maintaining the lottery system for middle schools. We did not get a great lottery number, but still got into one of her schools that she ranked. My daughter has excellent grades and test scores and probably would have gotten into a top choice if screens were in place. But we are 100% okay with this more equitable system. We are in a district where there are many good school options for middle schools. We had multiple friends with lottery numbers as bad as the bottom 3% who are still happy with their placements. The one change I would request for next year is that the DOE distribute lottery numbers sooner, and with that information on how to interpret them. It was helpful to have those numbers so we could manage our expectations and help to make decisions about rankings. For the few families that were considering private school, it helped them to know whether they had a chance if there were only 1 or 2 public schools they would consider. 66 out of 90 families on the grade voluntarily shared their info with one another on where they were sending their children next year. And the vast majority felt somewhere between satisfied with their placement to very satisfied. A big part of this may be that while many families rank schools with higher numbers of applicants per seat, Many also ranked other schools, like zone schools, as their top choices. I'm assuming.
Lupe, if you could wrap up, please. Thank you.
Yes. No, thank you for this time, and just appreciate. There are many families that agreed with getting rid of screen schools, and this was something that equitable organizations have been pushing for years before the pandemic, and we appreciate the pandemic just being able to allow this, the possibility for that to happen, for students to have access to excellent education. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm going to move over to Tunisia. We're going to come back to you. We said we're going to come back to you. Do you want to read some comments?
Hi, yes. Okay, so we have a comment from a family that says, we need data feedback about how students and schools are doing with the new lottery admission system. With such a major change, I think feedback is warranted to aid future decision making. I would also welcome everyone who wants to speak to please raise your hand. We're welcoming feedback, and great feedback is welcome from all. So if you can please do that.
Okay. Thank you, Tunisia. We're going to go to Daniela Egorov.
Thank you. I want to say that we all are entitled to our opinions about the admissions process. We're not entitled to the facts. The fact is, since lottery has been instituted, we have seen a massive loss of families in District 2. That is a reality. So we can all say, oh yes, there's so many families who are happy with the systems. Where is these families? Because so many people left, and it's going to be even worse this summer. We all know, we all have friends, we all have neighbors who have seen, I'm leaving because of middle school. I'm leaving the next 2-3 years because I don't want to go through that process. That is just a reality. As much as we love or don't love the lottery system. And I think what Johanna said is so important. And it was like my first time when I decided to run for TC, I said this, we need to stop with the scarcity, I'm sorry, I have somebody calling me, the scarcity mindset that we are all fighting for some schools, and then we keep saying, oh, I want my kid to go near, I wanted our kids in District 2, our kids here in my neighborhood. No, we need to have schools that every family should be excited about the school their children should go to. And the best way it's guaranteeing that the families decide what is the best school for their children, not the government, not DOE, not the enrollment department. With all respect to you, Sarah, I'm sure your team is fantastic, but you cannot know better than each family about what that child needs. And families in New York City, including mine, are happy to go a long distance if you can get a better school. My son takes the bus every day at 7 a.m. and we're going to continue doing this because that's the best way to access that school. But I do think that we should have a better school nearby. So we need to really work on expanding the good schools. And the other thing that I mentioned in the chat that I think it's very important for you to know, for you all to know, we get so many requests of families who are so unhappy with their middle schools and they are begging to get a transfer. They are begging. If DOE actually left all the families that are unhappy, leave the middle schools that they don't want to be there, some schools would have very, very few students. See, the schools continue open because we force families to keep there. They don't want to be there. And that's what we should stop. We should stop forcing families to stay in schools that are not serving their kids. Thank you.
Thank you, Daniela. The next speaker is Hunter Dare. Hunter, you should be able to speak. As a reminder, Hunter is a member of this Admissions and Diversity Committee.
Thank you. So I want to start off by, let me start my video as well. I want to start off by thanking you, Sarah, for being here and for hearing D2 families and for hearing lots of different groups around the city. I know that you've been actively engaged, so thank you very much. It's really a welcome change from what we saw in the prior administration. So we really appreciate that. The first thing is I think that it's kind of strange to say that, for families to say that they love a lottery and they want lottery to be for everybody. There are a great many families, as Daniela just talked about in D2, who want screen schools. And in D2, we had lottery schools and we're talking about middle schools here, we had lottery schools and we had screen schools. And every family that wants a lottery school certainly has the ability to choose to apply to lottery schools as opposed to the screen schools. It's really that the screen schools happen to be in much higher demand. There's actually a middle school petition going around. Many of there are a few hundred signatures I know on it, asking for honors in every classroom or in every school. And many of the signers are D2 people. And one of the reasons I think why that is because suddenly we have this vast range of kids in middle schools where used to there was diversity of where kids were in terms of their performance, but it was narrower ranges and schools were better able to cater their programs to that group of kids. When the range is 3 and 4 grades below level to 2 to 3 grades above grade level, it becomes very difficult to cater education to that wide range of kids. I've seen that. We ended up with our 12th lottery choice, and that was our zone school. It is a great school, but at the same time, our daughter has really struggled to get the challenge that she needs, and that's what many of these D2 families are responding to. For those people that are concerned about a test, and I think that we should not only bring back a test, but we really need a high cap test because the state test, the difference between having a 4.5 and a 4.2 is oftentimes 1 or 2 questions, and it's not really representative of what a child's knowledge are. But if you have an above grade level test that would be available for screening where you could really differentiate among kids, that would be a better way to group kids together that have similar abilities. And it might not even be a total school choice system. You might have it, you're really just looking to put kids in a program that best matches their needs. And so what I would really like, I think having a high cap test would be important, but I think that you also need local norming, and especially for students with disabilities. There are ways to adjust test scores for kids that have certain disabilities, and there are those that are given more time. There are those that have other accommodations, and there are actually ways to look at the scores through local norming specifically for those disabilities, and we could guarantee seats for kids with those disabilities because it is true that not all kids do test well, and a lot of that is because of specific disabilities. And so, I would appreciate having a more sophisticated testing system. And I think that could address the concerns of those of a wide range of people. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Hunter. Are there any other comments that people want to reflect? Oh, Janie, looks like you want to speak. Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. So there's a lot of commentary in the comment about why people are leaving. I have an 8th grader. He went to a District 2 elementary school, District 2 middle school. We are now leaving the system because his lottery number was the bottom 2%. So I guarantee you that he most likely won't even get allocated to a high school on his list. So I'm just a data point. I'm just letting you know. Thank you.
Thank you, Janie. Our next speaker is going to be our CEC President, Ben Morton. Ben, go ahead.
Thank you, Craig. My first comment is less CEC, but more as a parent to reflect. I have an 8th grader as well, to reflect our experience with applying to high schools. I don't, one of my daughters, I have 3 daughters, applied to a music program. So she auditioned at a number of schools. You upload videos to the My Schools website. I'm not sure if the plan is for next year to have auditioning in person again. If it's also going to be online, I highly recommend that there's feedback in the system, that someone's actually, it notifies you when someone actually looks at the video of kids who audition. who knows what's happening? You know, was the video seen? Was there some commentary? Were there some recommendations? You know, these students work very hard to put a video, to put to you know, to give their, you know, release part of their soul in their music or what they're trying to accomplish, and to give them some feedback. I think it's important. So that's one comment in terms of the system. You know, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago when my other daughters were, my oldest daughter was applying to this, you know, you didn't have this online system. And I think there's a lot of great things about it. And there's always room for improvement. So I hope that can be considered. And then I just wanted to discuss one other point brought up by both Len and Matthew. And that's with regards to District 2 priority. We have a problem in our district where we have a lot of excellent students. And well, I shouldn't say excellent. We have a lot of students who apply to our district, and there are just not enough seats. And so historically, we've had about 500 plus students who, without other options, would not be able to attend a school in our district. And because of the lottery we saw last year, the system where a lot of families were just shocked when they didn't get any of their 12 choices. Now, because enrollment has fallen in our district from 27,000 to 23,000, you know, because of that drop, maybe some of these issues won't be as severe as last year, but it's still, there will be hundreds of students who will not get a high school choice in their district, in our district, while students around the city do have borough priority. So at the very least, if students in Queens, Brooklyn, the Bronx, Staten Island have borough priority, we should also have borough priority in Manhattan. So at least, you know, students don't have to travel an hour plus to attend high school. And I think Sarah Kleinhandler, Matthew, I'm sorry, I don't know how to pronounce your last name, but if you can consider bringing back priority to the borough, I think this is one thing we can agree on. If every other borough can have high school priority, at least we should have that. Obviously, I prefer to have district priority to allow people, because we have a huge district comparison to other districts. But you know, just as you know, just traveling across town could be a tremendous difficulty for families, for students. So, but thank you for the opportunity, and I also really appreciate the fact that the Office of Student Enrollment came here to listen to families today, and I know you've been also speaking with other council members in other districts, and it's a wonderful change now that there's been true engagement. Thank you.
Thanks, Ben. So we're going to move to the committee chair, Robin Kelleher.
Thank you. I'll make this quick since I know it's getting late and I respect everyone's time. I just wanted to make a comment after Janie spoke about having to leave the system, which is such a great loss to all of us. I mean, the amount of hours that she puts into the CEC is just dreadful. I mean, the work. But I know in the chat, people talked about private school, and I know it's often considered a luxury, and people say, well, you know, that's like, well, District 2, good for them. They get to leave. Like not everyone has that option. True, that is true. But there are also a lot of parents that I know. I have a 5th grader right now. I haven't gone through the high school experience yet, but I have 5th grade friends who are literally doing everything they can to try to figure out how to afford private school when they can't. Some are trying for financial aid, but they're just at the line where they don't qualify for financial aid, but they really can't afford private for even that one child. And they're talking about extra jobs. They're talking about downsizing their apartments. And it's really a tragedy. I'm not talking as a CEC member right now. I'm talking about as a parent and a fellow friend to these families. And it's more than just an enrollment number statistic. It's families having to make really difficult life decisions that may negatively impact the other children to get through these years that we have right now, where the offers they have for their school situation for their children aren't appropriate and aren't appropriate for their children. And I think that's the saddest part of the whole thing. It's the sacrifices families are having to make when they already spend a tremendous amount of money in tax dollars on schools, and their kids just happen to get a bad lottery number and can't get into a school that their child needs. Thank you.
Thanks, Robin. So we'll move to Tunisia. Tunisia, would you like to speak?
Yeah, so bringing up a question again that was asked before and asked again in the chat, which was parents are wanting to know about the data on how the system has impacted, especially students with disabilities, ENL students, and students in large. And when can we get that data? Because it just started this year, so we know we won't have it right now. But is there like a time frame in which parents can go and get that information so they do know what's going on, especially if they are making plans for younger children?
Thanks, Tunisia.
I'll just say there, we can work with your council to figure out when and what kind of data you might, the council might be requesting. So Mr. Das, we definitely can work with you and Ms. Kelleher to figure out what kind of data would be helpful.
Great.
Thank you, Sarah. Kush, do you want to speak?
Yeah, I just want to address a few different things that I've seen in the chat and people have spoke about. I want to address a couple of different points. One, several people had mentioned that people have left the district, and it's not just a district phenomenon, that's a citywide phenomenon. I'd agree with that. However, the numbers don't lie here. Our district has lost much more than other districts, 25% to be precise, compared to a citywide level, which is much less than that, I believe under 20%. Secondly, speaking in regards to we can't know that whether or not this is actually because of middle school and high school issues. Again, I disagree. As many of you know, I had one-on-ones with both Chancellor Banks and First Deputy Chancellor Weisberg. They agreed that there were disproportionate drops, both in the city and by district, at the 6th grade and 9th grade level. They believe the data did support that people were leaving, and they were leaving because of middle school and high school issues. Another data point, I've mentioned this before, people may not like it, but this past year, we had a CEC election, and of the 9 elected positions, 8 of us ran on platforms to maintain or bring back screening, G&T and other issues. 8 of the 9 electeds won by a large margin, quite a large margin. Next, someone talks about lottery. That's the equitable method. I inherently challenge. I mean, many people know I mentioned this many times before. My kids are brown. They're half Indian, half Hispanic, and I say equity is not served by lottery. I'll point to a few points. You heard the principal from PS 126. He said the diversity actually was higher when there was screening at his school. I will mention also that if you really think that there is an equity problem in the city, take away screening and you have left no accelerated options for the public school students. They have all gone, all those opportunities then become the exclusive monopoly of private schools and Catholic schools. Explain the equity there. Lastly, people who keep saying that they want lottery, great. We had a system that had lottery for people that wanted it. We also had a system that had screen schools for people who wanted it. I cannot get behind anyone that wants to impose their will on mine. That's not how this country works. It's not how our district worked until 2 years ago. Lastly, some more data point. I promised Sarah I would provide this. We had encouraged that people go back and actually look back at the town halls. There was the DOE conducted town halls before we went to a lottery method. And I suggested that enrollment go back and look at those tapes. I did say I would provide a summary of that because I had this in a letter that I wrote to Mayor de Blasio. I'll read some highlights of it. Dear Mayor de Blasio, why were high-performing academic schools good enough for your kids, but they aren't for mine? Many families have already fled New York City because of what Carranza and the DOE are doing to the New York City school system. You know this affects tax revenue and ultimately school budgets in an already strained education system. Are you aware that most parents in New York City of all colors actually want to keep these schools? How many families do you want to leave New York City? The DOE conducted 6 town halls last spring to amass feedback. At the citywide engagement, a supermajority, 81% of the 64 speakers, wanted to keep high-performing school standards. And at the individual borough meetings, in Staten Island, 100% of 22 parents who spoke about screens were in favor of keeping them. In Queens, 81% of 26 speakers were in favor of keeping screen schools. In Manhattan, 70% of 30 speakers preferred keeping screens. In Brooklyn, 53% of 36 speakers wanted to maintain screens. Only in the Bronx did 27% of 15 speakers were in favor of keeping screens. Have you actually bothered to watch these videos? You know how many of these speakers...
I'm sorry. We had
Can
terrible
you mute
weather.
all Craig for a moment?
It's not your harvest, it's your shipping.
Kush, you're muted. Kush,
I can't hear.
Kush, you're still muted.
Sorry, which part did you leave?
That last about 90 seconds or so.
Yeah. Rewind in like a minute.
What did you get all percentages? None of it. Okay.
Wait, no, the percentages of each for who was for screening in
Yes.
each borough. Yes,
That we heard.
Yes,
Yeah, that we heard.
that.
Yes.
Yes.
Do you know that many of these speakers were in fact actually minorities, Asian, Hispanic, and Black? That many speakers, yes, including the white ones, were first or second generation immigrants that overcome multiple advantages daily. That the overwhelming majority of English language learners, Spanish speaking and Mandarin, wanted to keep these high performing schools. Show me the equity in denying these families. This was written to me, it was written by me more than a year ago, but I think still relevant today. Just thought I'd share because I don't think it was shared when I shared it with the mayor and several DOE officials back in November of 2020. That's it. Sarah, I'll let you speak if you care to. We did intend to separate this into middle school and high school. I know some of the high school comments got wrapped up in there. If people, I'll add a little bit more time for people to just quickly on high schools, and if you're willing to stay, and if you're not, I just have one comment from a parent and one comment regarding priority. So Sarah or Matt, if you want a minute, go for it.
We appreciate this feedback. I think we are copying the chat, and maybe Robin, if you want to also send it to us so then we can answer the questions in the chat thoughtfully, as opposed to just firing off responses right now. This was a very informative evening for us. We hear you loud and clear, and we are going to come back to this group once we start to make decisions about the following year's middle school and high school admissions process.
I had one more. Matt, did you want to add anything?
Yeah, Matt, would you like to add anything?
Just to Sarah's point, this was great. This was dynamic. Thanks for sharing perspectives that are personal in a lot of ways. You know, what we're discussing is not just the future of our city and our school system, but of your kids. And we appreciate you taking the time to be here with us.
I'm going to read one comment from if you don't mind, like I said, we'll cover high school a little bit quickly. I'm going to read one comment, and I see Hunter has his hand raised, who I presume for high school. This one parent wanted to remain anonymous, and she said, it's nice to know everything is on the table, but what about the debacle for this year's high school? We don't even have results. However, the DOE knows so how many kids were in D2 did not get one of their choices. As a parent, I feel this year's kids are collateral damage and no one cares. There are 15 instructional days left in the calendar year, and we do not have placements. especially for kids with IEPs, etc., need time to transition and not get caught up in late fall. I also don't think it's fair to make the students wait until June to find out where they'll be going to school next year. It's so upsetting that my son still doesn't know where he will be, especially with the lottery system. I'm sorry, that was a middle school comment and a separate parent. Apologies. Craig, would you like to unmute Hunter?
Or Hunter, you should be able to speak.
Yeah, I did want to follow up on high school as well. I think one of the important, one of the biggest things that I think is going to be important is in next year's high school, assuming that we continue with having grade banding, that the grade bands are not giant like they were this year. When you have grade bands that encompass 50 or 70 or 80% of the kids, it really just turns high school into an effective lottery as well. I mean, there are reasons why we want to group kids together. At the same time, I think that it is valuable, and I think several people brought this up, that you don't want to create this unreasonable pressure for every kid to get 100. Being perfect is not a great goal, but being very good is a great goal, and having some kind of bands like 95 to 100 or something like that, I think is a great way to go forward, to not try to force people to be perfect, but at the same time recognize that there are distinctive performers.
Thanks, Hunter. Is there anybody else? Are we allowing people?
I think if anyone is speaking specifically to high school matters, I would say let them go. Please, everyone, limit your comments to high school only. Since I think we covered middle school, I know we covered some high school already. I just don't know how to separate that. We did say there would be separate speaking points. So if you're speaking to high school only, please go for it, and then we'll let our guests from the DOE go.
Okay, Faith Bondi, go ahead.
I spoke really before about high school and was exclusively high school. I really just wanted to say thank you, because I do feel that Sarah and Matt and the entire team from DOE and Kelly is here with an open mind and not just paying us lip service. And I think that's a huge change from the past administration. And it's really comforting to see whether the changes that we asked for are implemented or not. At least we feel we're being heard. And I think as a parent, that's really, it feels encouraging. And so thank you for your time. Thank you for listening, and thank you for what we know will be taking it back to all the other people who are decision makers, because it means a lot to us.
Thank you, Faith. And is there anybody else before we?
I have something to add on high schools if people are,
Sure.
But I'm happy to let parents speak first.
Yeah, I think it's back to you, Kush.
Sarah, yeah, I just wanted to reiterate, one thing that the president said, just regarding District 2. I do want to reiterate that certainly was a problem for us last year. I anticipate it's a problem again this year. I don't know if you know what those preliminary results look like yet, but that is something of high concern to our district. I didn't have a resolution handy yet, but I will make sure I send it to you guys as well. But there was just, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, 18%. I remind everyone that 18% of District 2 high school, 8th graders applying to high school.
Read the comments, but most of the parents agree with us.
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, you got to read these comments.
Wendy,
they want district schools.
Someone, Craig, can you meet Wendy? Although Wendy, if you would like to speak, you may. All right, I'll continue. Just a reminder, 18% of District 2 8th graders did not get a seat in high school last year. I don't know what that looks like this year, but I'm concerned that it's going to be quite high again. And that compares 18, and it was 11% for Manhattan. So I do reiterate what our president said, and what President's Council said. We would like district priority returned, because I think those seats and those high schools were created specifically to accommodate a dearth of seats for District 2 students, geographic District 2 students. I believe our family coordinator here, Jennifer Greenblatt, helped create one of those schools, and she could even speak to that. I don't know if she cares to. And at the very least, this puts us on unequal footing with the rest of the boroughs, which all share borough priority of some sort. This seems a very punitive measure that was put in place by the previous administration, and I hope that that's something that can actively be addressed. It's something that we haven't addressed in some of the larger meetings that we've been in. Thank you for inviting us, but we haven't been in. But I did want to bring up to your attention again here as a specific District 2, and I think a Manhattan problem as well. I'll agree also with what my colleague Hunter Dara said as well. The banding, and shouldn't be new to anyone because I challenged the chancellor on it as well at the town hall. If you're going to have a tier 1 band, that can't be a 80% band, 70% band, or even a 50% band. If you're going to divide something into 5 buckets, one would think the starting point might be around 20%. And I would argue that tier 1 might want to be even more selective than that. There's many other thoughts. You've heard some of them from me, but I'll leave you with that. I will say one other thing on high school as well. One other thing that we should also consider that I would address some of people's concerns is a more granular grading for when you're applying to middle school, because I think we end up in this district with a lot of perfect report cards, and then everything is and it doesn't matter whether you include math or science or punctuality or time management or follow school rules. It matters not at all if you make it 1%, 15%, or 50%. There's just a large number of perfect report cards in our district. And that leaves us entirely by being chosen by the state test. If there was some more granular grading there, even if it was 3, 3.5, 4, great, or I would say more granular than that, that would alleviate some of the concerns as well. Sorry if that went on long-winded, but these are some of my thoughts and some that I've seen from parents as well. Again, I'll give you guys a chance to close out. And otherwise we will continue with some data requests and some sharing.
Yeah. No, just thank you again. We appreciate the time. We appreciate being invited here, and we'll look at the questions and talk about some data requests, and we're happy to come back.
Okay, great. Superintendent Kelly, I don't know if you're still with us. Do you have anything else to add?
No, I mean, I think that as we're closing this year out and starting to think about next year, there's as Sarah said, there's a lot of different things that are being considered, and I think that tonight's forum was helpful in being able to raise up what are going to be most important to families.
And I would definitely like to thank DOE Enrollment for their time and showing up. You were patient. You listened to all the parents, some of them multiple times. And I do see a change from previous administration, which I think, though many of us disagree, I think we seem to be fairly united on that. So I'll close on that note and let you go.
I just want to say thank you again and echo what Chris just said. And thank you to all the parents for taking your time out of your nights. I know you're all exhausted and had other things you could have done or probably needed to do. So I'll end it here as well, but thank you so much for all of your thoughts. And I'm saving this chat and I will send it along. And please feel free to reach out to us directly with more questions and comments and concerns.
Thank you, everybody.
Can we share your emails with
Yes.
I will do that, and I'll share my email and Robin's email as well for anyone who wants to stay on. And,
thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye.
Eric, good night, Kelly. Good night, Matt.
Good night.
Bear with me. I don't have those emails handy. Robin, do you have anything else to add while I find these emails?
I think most people are signing off. Lost a lot of people.
Sign off. My hair just got ripped out.
I'll still post the emails as I said I would, and whoever wants.
Thank you, Fire in Tunisia.
There you go.
For
It's there. Kush, somebody put it in.
Okay.
Thank you for monitoring the chat, and thank you, Craig, for asking the questions.
Okay.
And I hope we get our, I hope get high school offers next week. I hope they come Monday.
I hope so too. All right. Thank you all. Thank you all for coming. I think we will save the chat and we'll be going.
Thank
you all for taking time.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks, Kush. Thanks, Robin.
Thank you.
Thanks, Janie.
Thank you, Craig, Tunisia, and Fire. Nice job helping us run the meeting today.
Thank you, everyone.
Dream team.
Dream team.
We did it.
I need a night out after this.
Yes.